process of a conference committee. So, yeah, I mean, he seems to be in a place where he wants to be declaring this national emergency, going it alone in a way that we know this president likes to do. I think ultimately this, again, this is the president. I think he essentially failed, right? If you think about what his actual promise was during the campaign, it was that the wall would be free, right? It would be paid for by Mexico because he was such a great negotiator. And here, not only was he unable to negotiate with both houses of Congress when he controlled both houses of Congress, he was unable after all of these years to get this done in a way that was about both sides coming together and about negotiation. So he's making an end run around Congress. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens with these Republicans. A handful of them seem to object to this. We'll see what happens when the rubber meets the road, and they might have to vote on this in Congress.
Yeah, it seems like it could be a very long road when we're talking about how this all plays out. Nia, stick with me. I want to get over to the White House, though. Abby Phillip is Abby's actually at the bureau. Abby, let me ask you this. I think one of the most important questions that was asked during that very long press conference and announcement was, where do you get your numbers?
Absolutely. And the president did not acknowledge at all that there were a lot of statistics and figures, many of which came from his own government, that seemed to contradict the principal claims that he's making here. I think we should start with the issue of drugs. The president talked about all of our drugs coming from the southern border. He's not incorrect in saying a majority of it does, but 90% comes through ports of entry, not between ports of entry. He talked about crime statistics, talking about an invasion of people, bringing crime, women being tied up, being brought across the border. But at the same time, illegal border crossings are down. And in fact, his administration says the spike that we've seen is in family units coming across the border and immediately turning themselves into Border Patrol agents and trying to seek asylum. So there were a lot of contradictions here in what the president had to say. And he didn't present his own statistics to really back up what he was trying to claim about the crisis at the border. He did some work to kind of undermine his claim. He talked about how he didn't have to declare a national emergency, but he did it because he wanted to build the wall faster. But at the same time, he acknowledged that there would likely be a protracted legal battle that would hold this whole thing up in courts for months and months. And in fact, this idea that he just wanted to do it faster might even undermine his claim that there is an emergency on the border altogether. So just a lot of things on both sides of these issues here, Kate.
100%. And one of the things he said that further undermined his claim was when he says, whether it's $8 billion, $1.5 billion, or $2 billion, we're getting a lot of wall done. You're getting $1.4 billion approved by Congress for a barrier of some kind. So you wonder exactly why. Where is the emergency? Where is the data? He had the opportunity here to present the proof of why he needed this national emergency, and he did not present data. And that is leading then to what the Democratic response is and already has been, and this has been swift. Let me go to CNN's legal analyst, Jeffrey Toobin, on this. Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer are releasing a statement, Jeffrey, as the president was speaking and saying, obviously, they're opposed to what he's doing, and also saying that the Congress will defend our constitutional authorities in the Congress, in the courts, and in the public using every remedy available.
Well, I'm sure that they will, but I'd just like to focus on something that Abby mentioned. The idea, he said a couple different times in a couple different ways, I didn't need to do this, but I want to go faster than Congress wants to go. Well, is this an emergency or not? He doesn't need to do it. That seems to admit that there's no emergency, and that this is something that should belong to the normal give and take between the executive branch and Congress and what they allocate money for and what they don't. He didn't get the money he wanted. Maybe he'll get it in next year's budget. But we're talking about an extraordinary remedy here that he is seeking, a violation of the norms of constitutional governments that's been in effect for more than 200 years, which is that it is the Congress who controls the power of the purse. And there is this law from 1976 which says that in certain emergencies, the government, the executive branch can reprogram some money. But the president said, there's no emergency. I didn't need to do this, but I just wanted to go a little faster. You can be sure that the lawyers who are challenging this change in expenditures took great note of that, and it's going to be figure prominently in the complaints that are going to be filed in court probably today.
Well, and he knows it, as he presented in like almost a Schoolhouse Rock kind of fashion of how a Trump administration is challenged in court on a Trump administration policy. I mean, he knows this is coming. He said he doesn't need to do it. He still wants to do it. And again, he's presented with the opportunity just now to present the data and the information that he might have that would necessitate an emergency. And all he said to reporters was, the numbers you have, which reporters got from the administration, the numbers you have are wrong. Let me go over to the White House right now. CNN's chief White House correspondent, Jim Acosta. He obviously was in the Rose Garden asking some of these important questions. Jim,
yes, ma'am.
What your takeaway?
Yes, Kate, I just want to talk very fast here because I'm so paranoid that they're going to pull the plug on us here in the Rose Garden. But I'm standing in front of some of these angel moms who came to the Rose Garden today to, I guess, testify to what they've been through in terms of their ordeals dealing with crime in this country and the undocumented immigrants that were responsible for the crimes that took away their loved ones. And you saw that moment during the press conference there when the president pointed to some of these ladies here so they could say, yes, the crimes that happened to our family members, that those are real crimes. And, we were just having a conversation just now. And, Kate, I was just telling them that in terms of all of us here at CNN, our hearts go out to them. There is no attempt whatsoever to diminish what they've gone through or take away what they've gone through.
Exactly.
But as you heard in that question that I had with the president there, it was really about the facts and the data and this disconnect that we have when we hear the president talk about immigration. He tends to talk about it in ways that demonize immigrants and that just don't stick to the facts. And so just wanted to point that out, Kate, that some of these folks came up to me right after this press conference was over, some of these very nice ladies here, and they're holding up these pictures of these loved ones who lost their lives. Ma'am, you were just telling me a few moments ago this happened to you as well.
Yes, I'm a legal immigrant. My family came to the right channels, and this is my only son, Ronald da Silva, who was murdered by a previously deported illegal alien. We need to secure our borders to protect American citizens. President Trump is completely correct on this issue. We need to protect this country.
Okay, and thank you very much for sharing your story, ma'am. I appreciate it. And thank you for that card. Thank you. And so, Kate, as we know, because we've covered this for so long, and there are so many passions and emotions on all sides, these ladies feel very passionate, feel very strong because of the ordeal they went through, that President Trump is on the right in this issue. And what we're going to see moving forward here, you heard the president declare that he's going to call this a national emergency, and it's a striking thing in this country right now because you have Democrats up on Capitol Hill, and you have the facts that, and some Republicans will say this too, and the facts that are on the side of not calling it a national emergency on the border, that there's not an invasion on the border and so on. It just adds a lot of emotional energy to this issue, and you can tell just by being here in the Rose Garden, Kate, that this is a very charged issue for a lot of these family members here. But no question about it, moving forward, the president, and you heard this at one point during the news conference, he knows this is going to get taken to court. He knows it's going to be tied up in the courts. It's going to be a court challenge over the next couple of years, and we're just going to have to wait and see whether or not that becomes another impediment, another wall in the president's way as he tries to fulfill this campaign promise. Kate?
Yeah, and that mother's story, not diminished at all. I'm so glad that she was able to speak, Jim. Thank you for bringing us her story. The question, though, has been not diminishing anyone's story and their pain. It's a constitutional question, and that's where this lands right now.
That's right.
And one of the big things that has come up, and one of these big areas of money that the president, with the emergency declaration, would be taking money from is from the DOD and military construction. And for that, let me bring in CNN political commentator, former...
This is CNN Breaking News.
Bring in CNN political commentator, former Republican congressman from Pennsylvania, Charlie Dent, on this. Congressman, I come to you because you wrote the military construction bill that is the focus here. And the president, in talking about it today from the Rose Garden, says that the projects that have been discussed when it comes to military construction, this big pot of money that they're going to be moving and redirecting now, he says those projects don't seem too important to me.
Well, yes, Kate. Can I read you a quote? He said he talked to the generals. These projects didn't sound too important to me. Well, this was the president's budget request brought to him by his generals and the Secretary of Defense. Congress approved these. These are very important projects. He said this doesn't sound like he said this is a very small amount $3.5 billion. Well, of the military construction budget, which is about $10 billion, that would be about 35%. He's going to take that. He says, also a direct quote, that we have rebuilt the military, buying more missiles and new defense equipment. Well, where are we going to put this stuff? In a shed? I mean, in a garage? You know, if you have more troops, they need housing. They need schools for their children and military hospitals. I mean, this is so outrageous, these things that have been said here. Of course we need to establish control of the border, and the president is incapable of articulating a coherent plan to establish operational control. But to raid military construction accounts, he's breaking the law. You cannot take money from a defense purpose for a non-defense purpose under the Budget Act. That's the law. I don't see how he does this. I mean, members of the Republican members of the Armed Services Committee and the Appropriations Committee are probably going to set themselves on fire over this. I mean, this is just a slap in the face to Congress and their power of the purse making authorities.
Congressman, stand by for me. Let me bring in CNN political analyst, USA Today columnist Kirsten Powers. Kirsten, one of the things that the president said, and this gets to kind of really what we all watched in the last hour as the president was at the Rose Garden. He said, look at the federal prisons population. We looked from the Federal Bureau of Prisons. The federal prison population broken down by inmate citizenship, 80% are American citizens. 80.7% are American citizens. And this gets to, if we just want to call it for what it is, what just played out is the president presented with facts, rejects them. Asked for facts, he doesn't present them. He does not give any new data to prove his point. And he says it's not about politics. But if we're being really honest, is that exactly what this is all about?
Well, it's about politics, but I also think he really believes this. I mean, this has been an issue for him, and this is an issue on the right where this is something that Donald Trump has demagogued. I mean, there's really no other way to put it. It's not reliant on facts. It's reliant on sort of racist tropes about, Mexican people and sort of presenting everybody as a gang member or a drug smuggler or a human trafficker. Facts be damned. If you look at, the Cato Institute, which is a libertarian institute, conservative-leaning libertarian, they have, put out reports saying, that this idea that the undocumented immigrants are more dangerous is just completely false. In fact, they're less dangerous than the average native-born American. And, if you look at the issue of what he was talking about, the drugs, and he said specifically, I seem to be addressing what he's hearing on some places on cable TV about the fact that the drugs that are being seized actually are at ports of entry. Well, where does that statistic come from? It comes from his government. Right? And it's not, these are not things that we're making up. These are the statistics that are coming from the people who are actually seizing the drugs, who are saying 80 to 90% of the drugs that he identified in his speech are seized at the border, at ports of entry. And he just doesn't accept it. And he won't accept it. He doesn't accept intelligence that comes from his intelligence community if it doesn't fit with his narrative, and he's not going to accept facts when it comes from his administration when it doesn't fit with his narrative. He was asked it, he rejected it, but this is an emergency in search of it. This is a crisis in search of an emergency. What is this? Yes, but this has long been a position of people on the right, though. So he has a captive audience on this. And if you look at the angel moms, for example, who, of course, our hearts go out to. I mean, it's so tragic. You had a woman who lost 100%. Her only son. I mean, whose heart doesn't break when they see that? But that's. Then when you put that up against the statistics, it doesn't match up. It doesn't match up that that we have a crisis going on where undocumented immigrants are coming in and murdering people. Of course, our system has problems that need to be fixed, and that woman said that the person who murdered her son had previously been deported. That's unacceptable. I think everybody would agree with that. But when you listen to the way the president talks about it, particularly when he talks about human trafficking, and then you go to human trafficking experts and they say, we don't know what he's talking about. This is not what's happening. We can't say it's never happened. But it's not the way he's describing it. You do have people who are desperate, who are coming across the border and don't know that they're being trafficked. That happens. but not what the president's saying.
Kirsten, stick by. David Gergen, let me bring in David on this one. David, give me some perspective. How would you characterize what we just watched play out in the last hour?
Golly. Listen, I think most of us agree that the nation needs better border security. But I think it's also very apparent that when the President of the United States takes on an issue like this, he has a responsibility to speak with clarity and to speak with truth. I found it disheartening that this president, excuse me, in this instance, presented a phony crisis, and he backed it up with phony facts. And he's now just trying to slug it on through the courts. That this is not the way to persuade or to pull the country together. And I do think, especially when what's going on here is an attack upon democratic traditions and mores, and when the president is going over the lines of what we expect presidential power, when the founders put together the Constitution, it was largely with a view of constraining the president so that he was not George III. And they were tired of people acting, in a way that was demagogic. And here, I think we've returned to a time of, demagogic argument, inappropriate, excessive use of presidential power, and not justifying it. This government has a responsibility to tell us the truth about what's happening. And to keep a clear head about this. He's asking us to go down a path that he's tried again and again to get the Congress to agree with him. He cannot persuade them. He can't persuade his own Republicans that this is a terrific idea to build this wall. And in our politics, after you've tried that, you stop, you go back to the well, you try it again, but you do not exercise excessive authority and do it backed up with phony facts.
No, but instead, when you're looking at a 2020 presidential re-election race, you slug on through and you continue to try to excite your base. Let me put it that way. David, thank you so much. Much more to come. House Democrats are making stopping President Trump's national emergency their top priority now. We're going to talk to a key member of one of the most important committees on this very issue about those plans. That's next. We have learned at least one thing, that the president has declared a national emergency to get more money for a border wall, and Democrats are already preparing to block it. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, they issued a statement a short time ago, in part saying this, that Congress will defend our constitutional authorities in Congress, in the courts, and in the public, using every remedy available. Let's talk about the remedies. Let's talk about the president's announcement. A key member of the powerful House Appropriations Committee, Democratic Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz of Florida, is joining me now. Congresswoman, thank you for being here.
Thanks, Kate.
Your reaction to the president's announcement just now?
I mean, my reaction is that it is repulsive that a chicken hawk like President Trump would steal money from our troops, damage our military readiness, and undermine our national security, all in the name of going around Congress because he didn't get his way in the compromise deal to build a border wall that is unnecessary, that is an ancient form of barrier for border security, and that the majority of the American people oppose. And, I mean, I think we need to dive a little deeper into what exactly he would be doing to our military readiness.
Congresswoman, I do want to ask you about that.
It's incredibly important.
Well, and it is, you are the chairwoman, not to get into the weeds, but you are the chairwoman of the subcommittee that handles funding on military construction, which is the pot of money that Donald Trump is now talking about. $3.6 billion is what the administration, White House says, that they will be redirecting, taking, and putting elsewhere. $1 billion. Let me play for you what the president said about those military projects just now.
We had certain funds that are being used at the discretion of generals, at the discretion of the military. Some of them haven't been allocated yet, and some of the generals think that this is more important. I was speaking to a couple of them. They think this is far more important than what they were going to use it for. I said, what were you going to use it for? And I won't go into details, but didn't sound too important to me.
Not too important, is it?
Well, I think clearly President Trump doesn't know the details, which is why he can't get into them. And I find it hard to believe that the generals told him that it was more important to build an unnecessary border wall than it is to make sure that we have defense intelligence centers built around the country at our military bases. Those are funds that are eligible to be taken under this national emergency funding that he's declaring. We have defense intelligence centers, we have military readiness training centers, we have F-35 maintenance facilities and hangars that he would take funding from in order to build his wall. As Charlie Dent said, where are we going to put our F-35s? We spend billions of dollars on F-35 airplanes to defend our nation. We have to make sure that our troops are trained. Where are we going to train them if he cancels these projects and instead moves that money to build a wall? At the end of the day, he is absolutely incorrect and in fact lying when he says that the generals are given discretion over how this money is spent. No. Kate, Congress appropriated these funds specifically for these readiness projects, and the president is essentially saying, nope, I'd rather build a border wall. This is not important, and I'm just going to take this money that Congress previously said, in coordination with our military leadership, that it was more important. He is jeopardizing our readiness. He will jeopardize the safety and security of our troops, and he will steal money from our troops who are defending our border in order to make sure that he can build this border wall boondoggle. It's unconstitutional, outrageous, and we are going to use every tool that we have at our disposal in Congress to make sure that he can't do it.
Last time we spoke, you said that you would absolutely be one to spearhead a legal challenge if this is how this went down. Well, this is how this is going down. Is that in the works?
Well, like I said, Congress is going to use every tool at our disposal. We will pursue this in court. When we return from our recess in a week, I plan to convene a hearing of the Military Construction Appropriations Subcommittee and bring our military leadership in front of our committee and ask them, point blank, whether they think a border wall is more important than the protection, the facilities that we have already funded to make sure that we can keep our troops ready to defend our nation, train them so that they are ready, make sure that we have our intelligence capability at the top of our game. I mean, we're talking about one of the projects, Kate, is an intelligence center in Europe whose job it is to keep an eye on Russia. You can bet that Putin is putting his feet up on the desk and laughing at President Trump because he is jeopardizing our military readiness here and at the same time dividing our ball.
On the response now, are House Democrats going to sue?
I would expect that we would use the courts, that we will use our legislative tools that are available to us. We will use the court of public opinion and every tool at our disposal. So I think by every means necessary, we are going to fight President Trump on his unconstitutional power grab that jeopardizes our military readiness and won't keep our nation safer.
Congresswoman, thank you for coming in. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. My pleasure.
We have much more to come on the Breaking News Inside Politics with Phil Mattingly after the break.